Are you ready to break free from the doubts and limits holding you back? Welcome to Embrace Your Value, where therapy meets coaching to help you unlock your true worth and take control of your life.
Hi, I'm Kristin, a trauma therapist dedicated to helping you heal, break old patterns, and reclaim your power.
And I'm Jen, your support coach, here to show you how to set fierce boundaries, embrace self-compassion, and step boldly into the life you deserve.
So whether you're stuck in self-doubt or feeling lost, know this: your value isn't up for negotiation. It's time to own it.
Every week, we tackle real issues that challenge, inspire, and empower you to live with purpose and confidence.
So grab your favorite drink, take a deep breath, and let's get started.
Because you're not here to play small. It's time to embrace your value. Have you ever agreed to do something and before the conversation was even over, you were already thinking, why did I say yes?
Oh my gosh. Or you hang up the phone and you're instantly annoyed and the other person hasn't even done anything wrong.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the biggest clues that we ignore. If resentment shows up immediately after you say yes, there's a really good chance you just crossed one of your own boundaries. Welcome to Embrace Your Value. I'm Jen Anderson, Beliefs and Boundaries Specialist, and with me today is
Kristin Burris, trauma therapist.
And today we want to talk about why that happens.
So, Jen, can you remember a time when you knew almost instantly that you'd made the wrong decision?
I'm sure I have a ton of them, but I'd like to share a couple client stories, or at least one. I actually had this come up twice this week in client conversations. And so it's part of the reason I thought it was a really good thing for us to talk about. I had a client call me the other day and she was like, oh my gosh. She said, my son asked me to help him do something. And before I could even process what he wanted, I had given him dates. And as soon as those dates were out of my mouth, I thought, ugh, I don't want to do that. That was supposed to be stuff that time that my husband and I were going to spend together. And she was like, I just instantly regretted it, instantly felt that resentment pop up. And so we talked it through. Thankfully, her son actually declined both of those days. And she said, my new boundary is I'm not bringing this one up again. And then today in a client conversation, it was the same thing. It was a mom and her son, and she had agreed to take her son on a trip and realized after she agreed that she couldn't do it. And it wasn't so much, she had a little resentment there, but she had a lot of guilt around having to tell him no. And so we talked through that as far as, you know what, it's okay to have to change your mind. It's okay to say, I just can't do it. I don't have the capacity. I don't have the wherewithal to take that on. And I think the resentment really came in after her son then got really angry with her. And she even resented even thinking that she could take him. And it made her really change. This is like where we're really working on her changing her boundaries with him and upholding firmer ones so that she's not always giving in to him. But I think those really point out where we say yes before we even think about it and why that resentment really shows up. So, Kristin, I have a question for you.
Sure.
From the work you do as a trauma therapist, why do you think so many of us say yes before we've even checked in with ourselves?
Oh, some of it is that it's just an automatic thing, especially if you were raised a people pleaser or raised to always give to others or whatever. It gets to be a little bit of an automatic. But I think on top of that, sometimes our nervous system learns that keeping other people happy feels safer than disappointing them. And no can feel like you're disappointing someone. If I say no and you don't like that answer, now we have potential conflict. For other people, saying yes becomes a survival strategy. And sometimes we just don't react or respond out of intent, just out of automation.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I think those are all really key. And keeping people happy. That's also something I talk a lot about is owning other people's emotions and how we don't always have to do that. I know for me, I used to really think resentment meant that I was being selfish. And I worked a lot on that because I didn't like that idea. But after doing the work, now I think of it as my check engine light. What else is going on underneath the surface that I need to take care of?
Ooh, I love that analogy because our emotions are designed to give us information. They're not necessarily telling us that something is wrong with us. They're often telling us something needs our attention. So we feel fear, that means there's a danger. We feel angry, that means that something has bothered us and we need to look more into that.
Resentment's not always the problem. It's what's pointing us to the problem. So, do you feel like resentment is more information that kind of ties into emotional awareness?
I really feel like resentment is a combination of a lot of things. I do a lot of work with substance abuse folks, and resentment is one of the big topics in AA. And it's really pointing the finger at other people when we really have to look at what was our behavior and what was our contribution in that. So sometimes it's that we don't want to look at what we did to contribute. And so we put that resentment on someone else. Sometimes it's we don't want to take accountability and then we put that resentment on someone else. So it's a place for room to grow emotionally. It also does come as a byproduct of ignoring emotions. So when you're not looking at yourself and you're not saying, oh, okay, this is my part, this is the thing that I'm doing, then we are going to project those or to blame other people for what's going on with us.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things, like you really nailed it on the head when you said we have to look into what our part is. I think that's one of the things the one client of mine is dealing with is she's allowed this behavior from her son for a while now, and now it's really getting a little damaging. And she's having to put a stop to it. And I think that resentment is really coming up for her. So I'm curious, do you see clients who have gotten so used to ignoring those emotional signals that they don't even recognize them anymore?
Oh, yes. I would say, especially as a trauma therapist, most of my clients, they may seem overly emotive or emotional, but in reality, they're not always even in touch with the reality of their emotions and where they come from. They can mislabel or misinform the emotions based on their trauma lens. And so at some point, you stop really paying attention or recognizing, especially when you feel like you can't trust your instinct about it. So I feel like I should be angry about this, but I'm not supposed to be angry. So I'm going to stop feeling this emotion. And then that kind of goes away.
Yeah. So when you have clients and they're like, you're looking back at their stories, what do you think that they're protecting when they say yes? What are people typically protecting with that yes? I know there's a lot of, with my clients, there's a lot of fear of disappointment. They don't want to disappoint people. They don't want, especially I have found with adult children whose parents use disappointment as more than anger when they were growing up. So if your parents said to you, I'm disappointed in you, but they never really verbalized that they were angry, then I've noticed that those women tend to not want to disappoint people.
I would say that What they're really protecting, everybody, and I say this as everybody, is what you're protecting is yourself and your safety. So when we have a fear of disappointing people, it's because that makes us feel safe when people approve of us or are happy with us. If we say yes because we fear conflict, then that keeps us safe, right? So I think at its core, these automatic yeses are really just protecting our what we feel is safe for us.
And I think there's a lot of women too, especially women. I think men do it too. But I think there's a lot of women, I know I felt this way, that don't even realize they're protecting something, that they're protecting themselves. They really just think they're being nice. So, how often, Kristen, do you believe that these beliefs? So, Kristen, how often do these beliefs start much earlier than people realize?
Oh, I would say almost always it starts early in life, especially in childhood. Your example was very common is that when people say they're disappointed in you, and that begins your story of if I don't do what people want, they will be disappointed in me and I will feel bad. Instead of I'm disappointed in you, I don't like the actions that you took. I am not in favor of your decisions, right? That's not objectifying the person or personalizing the behavior as the definition of the person, right? So when you hear enough times you're a disappointment, I'm disappointed in you, those things over and over again, that's what you begin to believe. And so that starts your story about how you're going to live your life. So if I want to avoid the yucky feeling that I have, which is shame, when somebody is disappointed in me, then I will say yes to everything because then nobody can ever be disappointed in me and I will be safe.
And I think that's really common for sure. Let's talk a little bit about what resentment feels like. And so I'm going to ask some questions, but I'm really asking them to you, the listeners, because I want you to see yourselves in this story. I want you to see yourselves where this shows up for you. So I'm really curious of you, the listeners. And Kristen, you're welcome to answer any of this, but where do you notice resentment first? I know for me, I usually notice resentment in my shoulders because that's where my tension lives. And so I notice when my shoulders start living like earrings and I'm feeling really tense and tight, it takes a minute and I need to step back and really evaluate why that's happening. Do you all feel it emotionally? Do you notice that you're crying easier? Is there something that's coming up for you? I know sometimes for me, I will really struggle with falling back into grief patterns for things that I haven't fully grieved or taken care of. And then all of a sudden I'm crying for no reason. And I'm like, okay, that's weird. Where did that come from? And again, I have to really evaluate it. And the other thing that I really notice with resentment is that for me, a lot of times too, it also shows up as anger. It shows up in a way that when I'm feeling really overwhelmed and I'm really resentful, I tend to snap a little easier. I always say that I'm turning into a volcano. And so I can always tell right away when that's happening. And it's gotten easier over the years. I didn't understand it when I was younger and I didn't understand why I would get so angry. Now I understand it and I can work through it much quicker, but it still shows up instantly as that anger piece of where is that? And so I'll feel the tension and I have anger and I'm like, oh, this is absolutely what's going on here. Kristen, do you have an experience around what resentment feels like for you? Even
For
your
me.
clients?
Yeah. No, I think for me, I don't have a lot of resentment because I really try hard to not say yes unless I really want to say yes. Resentment for me is more about feeling like things haven't been reciprocated as far as I've done not that there's tit for tat, but I've done X amount for you and I feel like I've gotten very little in return. And that's where my resentment tends to show up. So for me, it's in my forehead. So that's my physical symptom is I'll be like, ooh, starts to wrinkle up. And I'm like, oh, sometimes my shoulders get a little earringy. I haven't heard that one before. I like that. But for me, it's probably more my forehead because it's the thought that comes up and that's how it gets projected onto my face. So I think, yes, that's how it starts for me physically, but emotionally, I think it's where I feel like I haven't been given to enough, in my opinion, obviously, in my own humble opinion. So yeah, and I think it shows up differently for different people, but I do feel like your explanation of anger and snappiness and volcanic activity is probably most common, is that it shows up as anger. So I'm wondering, Jen, do you think that our bodies recognize crossed boundaries before our minds catch up?
Oh, yeah, 100%. We've talked about this a lot, but I think our bodies always know before our mind catches up. And I think that's why it's so easy to fall into anger because you're instantly angry and you don't know why. You don't even know what set it off. At least that's how I used to feel. Now, at least I recognize it. But I think that's stored resentment in my body. And it's like quickly going to just jump out at somebody. So absolutely.
I think the nervous system reacts before the mind even knows what's happening. That's why when people come in, some of the first sessions are built around what do you notice in your body? Because that's your first clue. Your body knows, your mind reacts. And so when you have those fight or flight feelings like your adrenaline, or suddenly your hands start getting sweaty, or your vision narrows, your shoulders tense, your muscles tense, your stomach starts hurting, those are our physical symptoms. And so we talk about that a lot in session so that people can start to recognize that. And then, of course, I'm giving them ways to manage the nervous system disruption.
Yeah, that's so good. Absolutely. So let's talk about some real life scenarios so that our listeners can really get some help with this. So, one of the things that I do with clients is that I tell them when it comes to saying yes, to always have what I call a back pocket script ready. And the reason I refer to it that way is because when we were teenagers, those of us Gen Xers, I felt like we always had things in our back pockets that we were ready to just pull out and use. And so I call this the back pocket script, where it's something like, let me think on that. So if somebody was to say to you, can you watch my kids today? You could say, I need to check my schedule, or I've got to ask my husband, or I need to think about it. Let me go see what's going on. Just so you have ideas, so you're not always saying yes in the moment.
I think that's actually should be the first level strategy. And I don't think that should be a back pocket strategy. I think you should pull that card out right away and just say, you know what? I think so, but let me check. Or let me check my calendar, or let me see what I can do and I'll get back to you. That gives you just that pause. That gives you that moment to say, maybe you do need to check your calendar, maybe you don't. But what you need to check is yourself and say, is this something I really want to do? So that the things that I used to automatically say yes to, I don't say yes hardly unless it's somebody I know, right? That, or it's something I know I want to do or can do. I will just start with, you know what? Let me check. Let me see what I can do about that.
Yeah, I do too. And it is the thing I teach my clients first because they have to take that pause. Is this good for me? It's not that we don't want to be helpful. It's just that we have to take care of ourselves as well. Because I do that all the time with using my husband as the example. I would say, I got to talk to Dave. I didn't always have to talk to Dave, but it was really the thing that I could say that nobody would really push back on. They'd be like, oh, yeah, you probably should check with your spouse. Yeah, I didn't always have to, but I did need it for me to decide if it was really something I wanted to do. So I love that idea.
Yes, I think checking in with yourself first and saying, is this something that I do want to do? And even if it's something you don't want to do, is it something that maybe you should do or that you can do in service of others? Right? I do a lot of things I don't want to do because know that person needs it, or I know that person could use this service or whatever. So I don't do things that I don't want to do lightly, if that makes sense.
100%. And I agree completely, because sometimes we don't have a choice. Sometimes we do have to do the thing, but we don't always have to commit on the spot. We definitely can take some time to wrap our minds around it. And that also leads back to resentment, because sometimes when you say yes instantly and you don't take the time to really wrap your mind around it, you do get resentful because you haven't given yourself that moment, that time to work through what it looks like for you. Maybe it's something you need to do for your kids' sake, but it involves an ex. And so maybe you just need to take a little time to really wrap your mind around that. Visualize it for yourself so that you know what you want to do in the moment, get clarity around it so you know where it's at. There's nothing wrong with that. This is how you become a well-rounded person and you really add value to other people's lives. But you can take that time for yourself and then come back to them and say, yes, I want to do that.
Absolutely. And then what we have to do, if we do decide to say no, then we have to set boundaries. And I think we've done enough talking about boundaries. We know that's the hard part. And it's not really even because of the other person. It's hard sometimes because of the conversation we have to have with ourselves afterwards.
Yeah. And there's a lot that come up when you set boundaries. There's guilt. There's the guilt that shows up that you don't need because you're doing something different. And so that's the reason it shows up. That's why I say you don't need it, because it just shows up because you're doing something different and your nervous system doesn't understand, it hasn't caught up yet. But then there's also the guilt that we associate with people who push back on our boundaries, that make us feel like, that we always say they make us feel guilty, which is really us trying to regulate their emotions and taking on their stuff when we don't need to. So guilt's a whole ball of wax that we've done a few episodes on, I'm pretty sure, but we do a lot. Kristin is great at talking about shame because they are different, and she's got a really great handle on shame. So I'll let her talk about that one.
So the easy way to remember is guilt is I did something bad, right? Shame is I am bad. So that is more a personalization. It's like at the beginning when I said, when you get personalized that you're a disappointment, then you start taking that on as a characteristic of yourself. Same thing with shame. When you think I am bad, then bad becomes a characteristic of you, and you have a hard time letting go of that. I'd rather deal with someone coming in with all the guilt in the world than coming in with even a little bit of shame, because that one is so much harder to dig out because you've made it a part of who you are.
So Kristin, I'm curious on one last thing. How do you help people stay with the uncomfortable feelings that come up from setting their boundaries instead of rushing to fix them?
Oh, yes. So I had somebody say something. I was so proud of this client. She's come such a long way. And she said, if I've learned nothing else from therapy, it's that I can get through uncomfortable feelings and not die. And I was like, oh my God, I know. I love that so much. I was like, if I've taught you nothing else, then let it be that. Because she's going through something really difficult right now. And she's, you know what? I'm going to be okay. And I was like, yes. So sometimes you just have to regulate yourself in the best way that you can through those uncomfortable feelings, right? The more we avoid the uncomfortable feelings, the more power they have over us. The more we let them simmer underneath, the more they can reach up and grab. So we really just have to move through them and move through the discomfort of whatever they are to get to the other side. And now we've taught our nervous system, hey, you can do hard things, right? You can be uncomfortable. And then guess what? We're okay on the other side. So then you start having more and more control over your nervous system.
So that is a really great thing for you to take with you is remember, what are you pushing away? What is the discomfort that you're not dealing with? Because if you're not dealing with it, you're causing yourself resentment. So give your nervous system and yourself a chance. Deal with it. And if you can't do it on your own, go ask for help. There are a wealth of people in this world that can help you. It doesn't have to just be us, but you're welcome to come to one of us. There are a ton of people that you could probably talk to that would help you. And so I would say don't sit on those emotions. I think if something is coming up and it feels just uncomfortable, got that dysregulation going on, figure out what it is, figure out what's holding it. And then if it were me, if I were telling you to remember one thing from this episode, I would tell you just to remember to pause. Take the time. You don't have to answer everything immediately. You are allowed to say, I need to think about this. And just give yourself that moment. So absolutely. So, Kristin, what an amazing episode. Sorry, I love to do that. Kristin, what an amazing episode this was. And I really loved all the creativity and the examples in here. I think that was really great. I think that there are women listening who are thinking, if I start saying no, people are going to think I've changed. Yeah.
I'd also ask back to them, does changing always have to be bad? Right? Is it different? Is it wrong? Well, it's just change. We have to look at it like that. If you're changing in a way that helps you care for yourself and show up with less resentment or anger, that may actually strengthen your relationships over time.
100%. Gosh, I love that. Because boundaries aren't walls. They're about creating relationships where you can show up honestly instead of showing up resentfully or even having to perform, not yourself. That's what this is really all about. So we would love to hear from you. If you have questions, thoughts about this episode, please drop them in the show notes. We would love to have that conversation with you. If you liked this, feel free to leave us 5 stars, leave us a review on Apple, and we just hope that you will join us next week for Embrace Your Value.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you for being here with us today.
If today's episode hit home, don't just keep it to yourself. Subscribe, leave us a review, and share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. Because everyone deserves to know their worth.
Next week, we're diving even deeper with more insights and tools to help you break free from limitations and live authentically.
Until then, keep raising your standards, owning your worth, and embracing your value.